Hello, everybody, and welcome to Julie's Unknown Podcast. Today, I have a special guest who I actually met in person. So, a lot of my guests that I have on my podcast are people I've met online in online groups, and she is one of the first guests that in this season that I've met in person. And I'm really excited. We met at a networking event down in Vancouver and instantly connected. We didn't even talk that much during the event. We just locked eyes with each other and we're like, I gotta know you. I got like we gotta talk. And then ended up having a Zoom coffee chat, which was like so much fun. And then from there, I was like, I want her to be on my podcast and to just talk about the amazing things she's doing, and that we get to dive into a deep dive conversation today around like boundaries, self-love. We'll see where the conversation goes, in which direction is very flowy. So welcome, Char. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. I'm Char Wong-Richardson. I'm a self-love and confidence coach. And how I got started and why I do this, I am a sexual assault trauma survivor myself from something that happened when I was 17. And at the time, I had suppressed it for many years and buried it and literally ran away from the whole situation. And after several years, finally having a vivid flashback and working through that. And that's when I realized I had to ask for help, and I started to get therapy. And, I think we've made a lot of headway now with therapy and normalizing therapy. But yeah, I was scared before that. It was a sign of admitting something's wrong and that I'm broken, right? But now I have a much healthier relationship, and therapy can only benefit people. It can't harm anyone or hurt anyone. But that was just a piece of the puzzle, doing the therapy and that healing. It was ultimately coaching and self-reflection and coaching myself that really helped me heal, which is an ongoing journey, but really gain that self love and confidence to then trust myself despite my trauma and to move forward and create a life where I freaking love it, right? I feel fulfilled, I feel light, because now I know to trust myself and I know what how to honor myself and what really speaks to me. And like you said, creating boundaries and being able to love myself so much, then show up confidently to project that to people and be kind and compassionate and be able to learn to say no and yes when it feels aligned. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with sometimes, is not knowing what they really want, or what, family or cultural or society expects us to do. And we follow this narrative that might have been prescribed to us versus what we really want to do. And for me, it's really trying to help other trauma survivors, other people, to love themselves so that they can have a life that feels fulfilling to them and that's happy and aligned for them, and not really prescribed to them by someone else's narrative. And that's what my mission and all I'm trying to do through my coaching practice is to help other people heal on their journeys. If ever, I think some people don't really get the opportunity and have the support to heal ever, or if it takes them a very long time. So I'm on a mission to help people. And the really cheesy part of it, sometimes I say, is ultimately, if everyone had this optimal level of self-love, then we would all just be kinder, compassionate people. Then there'd be less hate in the world. And so I'm on a mission to help everyone who's willing to work with me. And that's how I started and why I started it. And
I
here I
love
am.
Oh, I
Thank
love that. Thank you for sharing that. And it is true. Like the more we work on ourselves, the more we find a sense of like humbleness, if that's even a word, toward
Humility.
yeah, humility, that's it. It's like because we realize like, oh shit, we don't have it together. We're not perfect. I feel like I don't know about you, but for me in my 20s, I thought I was like I know myself and I got the shit. I'm good. And it was just like overconfidence of like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. But then also in my 20s, therapy was, ooh, you're going to therapy. It was not as accepted as it is today. And so I just feel like that the moment you do this deep kind of level of healing, really uncovering the things that are all underneath, it's almost as you're like, oh, I don't know everything. And I'm not perfect and I do have a lot of shit. And this is not all going to heal overnight either. And so there's just this level. And the minute you find that compassion and that humility towards yourself, and you're like, well, everybody's battling the same battle.
To be compassionate for others around you.
Yeah. So I'm curious, What was this one moment? I don't know if you could think of it off the top of your head, but a moment where you set a boundary and you're like, wow, I was actually able to do that. If you can think of a story where you once said no, or you said, wow, it wasn't okay, where this is a boundary, and that maybe a past version of yourself would have been total people pleaser, said yes, but you surprised yourself on how well you like handle that, setting that boundary.
Yeah, that's a good one. So many. I like to say I'm a boundaries badass because of the self-love I've worked on so hard. And I try to help that with other people, I think. And you've really hit it there, right? Like perfectionism and people pleasing. And I think a lot of people struggle with that or working on that. Recover. I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist and recovering people pleaser because I think, especially as women and just people also, depending, like I have a Chinese background, so I'm a child of immigrants. So culturally too, it's just keep the harmony, keep the peace, keep everyone happy and keep your head down and do your thing, right? And I think for me, a big one that comes up a lot is with family. And for me in particular, it's like in-laws. We've had to really work on boundaries and it's not easy, right? Whether you're setting boundaries with family or for yourself, like even at work or with friends, I think for me, I literally Googled the art of saying no, right? It's this is how I learned how to set boundaries. It was, what are you saying yes to? You say, no, we can't make it. No, we're not going to do that. And you feel bad. But also, that's a big part of boundaries for me is now learning to set boundaries without the shame or guilt because I know to honor myself and what feels right for me. And so I think key moments were a lot around family and family drama and being okay with that. It wasn't easy, and people who sometimes don't respect them or don't want to hear your boundaries, right? But ultimately, feeling confident knowing like what's best and what's healthy for me and my family and I. And yeah, I think really, learning little tools. It's like not make up excuses. Don't not making up lies. Just simply, thank you for thinking of us. We won't be able to make it. And I think even telling some of my friends are like, well, what do I say? And I was like, I I can't make it because you have other things to do. And the other thing you're doing might just be sitting at home and chilling. But that's still something you need to do, taking care of yourself, right? And I think often we think we have to have an excuse. We have to have a reason. We got plans, we got something else. But why do A, don't need to make something up, but B, the plans could just be you time.
I love
And
that
I
you,
think,
yeah.
yeah, thank you. I think that's a big thing for me. Boundaries was learning to do it without the shame and guilt and learning to do it because it's honoring myself and what feels aligned and your energy, right? Like I would say like a simple one, like not everyone has family drama, but like a simple one, like social outings, do you want to go to that dinner? Maybe your energy is really not there. No, it's been a tough week, it's tough season or something. And saying no and trusting, like I have a friend that we just recently had to like reschedule plans and it involved like our kids. But she was just like, where's your energy at? Where's your energy at? We're like, you know what? Let's just chill. We'll just reschedule and we just entertained our kids in other ways, right? And like I didn't know we checked each other, but because we have an open communication, we know how to honor ourselves. I think sometimes we project like, oh no, they bailed. What does that mean? Like she doesn't want to spend time with me. But it was we are secure in ourselves and secure in our friendship that none of that insecurity was projected out because we're like, all right, we're just both burnt out from the week. It's been a crazy week. And that's that. So I think again back to that self-love, we are secure in ourselves and secure in others because we have that compassion for others, then we're not going to project and worry about someone bailing on you or someone setting boundaries with you or vice versa.
Yeah. And you brought a lot of interesting, really good points in that. One is because I think that sometimes when we start doing the inner work, we think, okay, we have to set the boundaries, but then there is another component to that boundary, which is a shame and guilt that comes with it. So it's like, yes, there's one thing of saying no and not being a people pleaser or not wanting to disappoint others and whatnot. But then it's like when you do say no, when you get to that place of saying no, then all of a sudden you got another set of things that you need to hold, and it's holding your own shame and guilt. Then it's holding the other person's response of whatever that could be, because sometimes people's response are great. They're like, okay, yeah, that's cool. And then you're like, oh, whew, that was easy. But then other times they're not maybe as pleasant or as understanding. And I think that there's just a lot to be held. And I think that is why healing and self-love is a journey. It's not just like, okay, you do it and then, oh, okay, one thing checked off the to-do list and then it's done. And so I love that you brought those topics on, because I think that that is important, is to say no, but feel good. So what would be like for you, like one practice that you started doing, and like maybe a tool you used or a practice you started doing that you were able to work through the guilt and the shame of saying no?
think, yeah, what I mentioned earlier was when you say no, what are you saying yes to?
Yeah.
Yes to quality time with your partner or with your family, or just time for yourself to unwind. I think for me, that was a big one, was like, what am I saying yes to? And maybe just sleeping on it, not having to answer. I don't know if you resonate, but like, I think before I was like a boundaries badass. Before I'd be like in the moment, I feel like put on the spot and panicked. Whereas you're like, oh, I'll get back to you. And then really think about it, sleep on it. Not from a place of selfish. I know self-love and self-care is like very like buzzy right now. But there's a fine line that it's not selfish, right? It's just honoring yourself and checking your energy, how this person or this group or this event or whatever that you're contemplating will make you feel. And where your values, I think also getting really clear on your values. That was a big one for me, was like, what do I care about? Am I just trying to please everyone? And why? What are my values? Where do they sit? How do I prioritize them? Where's the priority of taking care of myself? And I think those were two tools I would say. What are you saying yes to? I guess that was three. Taking time when someone asks you or when you're contemplating something, don't rush to a decision. Reflect on it. If you're really woo woo, meditate on it, journal on it. And then the third one, yeah, I think getting clear on your values and then prioritizing your values and what's important to you. And that changes, right? And you can always change your mind. I think that changes with the season of, if you're busy going to school, and I always avoid using the word busy too. Just different seasons of your energy where you're at. If something's big has happened lately, you maybe just need extra time to yourself. I think that's a big one. I would say those three tools. That's a big one for me. I was learning was stop shoulding all over yourself. When you say, oh, I should go to that thing, or I should give them a call. When I say should, I would pause and be like, that's usually an external factor that's influencing my decision making. And so versus like, oh, I want to go to that dinner, I want to go to that party. I think that really helps me gauge my values and where my energy lies too.
Yeah. I love
How about
all of,
you?
well, definitely the sitting on it. Sitting on it is like also a big one for me. And also for me, I feel like talking it out sometimes with someone either like that I trust to because sometimes when I talk, my tone of voice changes on whether I want to do something or not. And I won't always catch it because I get in my head and I try to come up with all the reasons why I should do it or why I should go or whatnot. But then as the more I'm talking, it's kind of my voice takes a different tone. And sometimes I realize it, but sometimes I need someone else to be like, you don't sound too excited about that. So that's kind of like one of my ways to sit with it. So here's an interesting one. So sometimes if I know a boundary needs to be set and I know there's a truth that needs to be spoken, but the opportunity, right? Because sometimes what happens is an opportunity comes in, and in that moment, you're like, okay, that would be an opportunity. Like if you're looking at it from above the skies, like let's say your angels guides are looking at you and they're like, oh, we just presented this opportunity to her for her to like set that boundary, speak her truth. But in the moment, sometimes I just get caught up with what's happening and that I actually don't set the boundary. I just stay quiet or I go with the flow, or maybe I do say yes. But then after that, I reflect. So I very much take the time to reflect and then be like, oh, wait, There was something there I should have said, something there I should have spoken. So instead of going right to that person or coming out of the blue and be like, oh, remember the other day when you said blah, 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 I meant to say this and this and that. Instead of doing something like that, I just surrender because now I'm aware. I'm aware of the boundary that I need to set. I'm aware of like what I need to say. And I trust the universe to provide me with the example again. And the example always comes up again, always. And then it comes, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm ready. So even though I may not be ready in the moment of when it happens, or if I instantly say something I shouldn't have said, or I say yes to something I should have said no to, or whatever it is, or like, or maybe a boundary that I should have set that I didn't say anything at all. Once I reflect and I realize what needs to be said, then it's kind of like I get like the confidence for myself, right? Because I reflected on it, I've like journaled about it, I know like I'm very aware, and so then I'm like, okay, so when it comes back around again, then I'll say it. So I guess to wrap that up, you'll always be given examples from the universe. You'll always be given opportunities to grow, opportunities to set boundaries. And so just because you didn't set it that one time doesn't mean that that's it, it's over, and you're not gonna be able to set it again. So let's say there was a party or a gathering and you said yes to, and you didn't want to go, you went anyways, and then you're like, well, I shouldn't have, and you just like kind of get stuck. Okay, well now you know next time that opportunity comes for you to say no to a party or maybe no to that gathering, say no, because you remember from the last time that you didn't have a good time. So you'll always get another chance to say it, to do it, or to speak a truth. Let's say you need to speak a truth, like something your friend is doing that you're not a fan of. You don't want to come out of the blue and be like, remember that thing you did a month ago? I didn't like it. And your friend's going to be like, the what? Or maybe get super defensive. And so just trust that that thing that your friend did that you didn't like is going to come up again. And then you can say it in the moment because you're aware of it. And you're like, oh, wait, that is not okay with me. I don't like when you say this or whatever it is, right? So
Do you feel that you can ever go back though? Because what's
what?
coming up for me when you're saying this, I'm like, oh, I would totally go back. I'm like, actually, I thought about that some more and X, Y, and Z. Like, I would still, I find sometimes I would go back and still say something, even if it's like the moment's gone, like the moment's passed.
I guess this is depending on, I think, the situation and the
Mhm.
decision and what is happening. So I think that sometimes if it is like a yes no boundary. So I think this is for me, like I'm trying to see if it's a yes no boundary, like going to an event or, saying yes or no, and I kind of like change my mind. I do go back if I feel confident enough of my answer, I do go back and I change it. So like let's say I made a commitment to go to an event and I actually don't want to go, I will go back. And if I know well enough like that it's such a hard no, I'll go back and change it. But when I mean like about the opportunity for it to come back again is like that for me, it's more like speaking a truth of setting a boundary, like someone doing something you don't like that they're doing and it's like it doesn't resonate with you. There's a truth that needs to be said that you're, like that is not okay when you talk to me like that, or it is not okay when you do this. And I think in those situations, sometimes, especially when it comes to like either friends, family, loved ones, like people who are very close and intimate with you, can be more challenging setting those boundaries
Mhm.
because you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. You very much care for how they feel, but there is also who you are and you want to be able to take care of yourself. And so in those situations, instead of going back and, because after reflection, it could be maybe a week, a month, right? Who knows how long it takes to heal per person. Instead of going back and saying, oh, that thing that you did a month ago, I didn't like, then that's when I'm like, I surrender to it and I trust the universe is going to give it to me again. And then I'm going to have the opportunity to say it in the moment. So that would be my differentiation.
I do like that perspective of trusting that the universe will present you with that opportunity again. I appreciate that because I think because I don't, yeah, that'll be a good one for me to remember because I think I'm always really like, oh, the moment's gone. Now I need to go back and like speak my truth and voice my concern or voice my opinion. And this is where my partner would be like, sure, you don't always have to say something. And I'm like, but I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, the opportunity will always come. It will always come back. It will always come back because we're growing. We're like always growing and healing, and the universe is like, oh yeah, you're growing and healing. Okay, let's see. Have you grown?
Here's some more stuff.
Here's some more steps, some more things to like, and it's but it's beautiful in that way because then, when the next time it's kind of interesting because when the next time comes around, that next example, and you're there, you're like, I got this. And it's really funny because like for me at least, sometimes what happens is the next time comes around and I was like, okay, I need to say it now. I need to say it now. And then I get in my head and I get flustered and I don't say anything. And I'm like, oh, I didn't say it. I should have said it. I didn't say it. Oh. And then I'm like, okay, you know what? It's gonna come a third time around. And it does. It always does. It comes third, fourth time around until I set my boundary. And then it's like, oh, and then once you do, you're like, yes, I did it.
You know what? A couple tricks I learned was from like watching some Instagram. I was like, if someone says something that doesn't sit well with you, well, it was more of like if someone's being narcissistic or passive aggressive, but I think this could still work. It's like, oh, could you repeat that again? And then you can like build up your confidence and think of your script and your response in your head while they're repeating themselves. Slash, sometimes I think it makes them stop, be like, oh, shoot, did I say something wrong? Or be like, oh, can you elaborate on that? Or can you tell me more?
Mm.
And then while they're saying that, you can think of your response.
That too, but then here's the other thing with that. I actually love that on another lens as well, because then
Mm-hmm.
when you're saying, can you repeat that or can you elaborate? Can you explain a little bit more? Then maybe what they initially said wasn't what you thought you heard. So here's the interesting thing as human beings, right? We're like, we each have our own perception based on our experiences in our lives. So sometimes when someone says something, even though it might come off passive aggressive or narcissistic, it might not actually be their intention. And so I don't know if you've had it where you like asked them, like, can you elaborate? Can you explain? And then did the story change, like, of what you perceived?
Yes, that's
It,
true. Yeah, like come from a place of curiosity slash compassion to maybe, yeah, understand them more. Maybe what they said, their intent
yeah,
wasn't what you're perceiving.
exactly. Because, like,
Yeah.
think of it as when we hear something that we're not fond of, it creates like a trigger reaction, right? And a trigger reaction, it can come in and be like, okay, now we need to set a boundary. Like that could be one part of it. But then the other part of the trigger reaction is something within ourselves that we heard. But when we get triggered, we hear part of the story, like our senses stop working. So when we take that moment that instead of like kind of diving into our trigger and we get curious, then our shift of the trigger changes, and then we can be able to like be more open to hearing because we're curious about where that person's coming from, and then we can actually hear the whole story. Because I know this
Mhm.
has happened to me with text. Like I'll read a text and then I get triggered and I'm like ready to set a boundary. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Hold on a second. I'm feeling angry right now. So I'm going to put my phone aside and I actually walk away from it. And then I come back to the text and I reread it. And turns out what I read initially was not what I thought it was. So sometimes it's like, yes, boundaries are important, but it's taking that breather, taking that moment of being like, oh, wait a second, did I hear this right? Did I read this right? And it's not second guessing yourself. It's just if whatever someone said or did comes from a place of trigger, maybe there's a moment to pause before setting the boundary and to come back to it or to get curious about it, like you said.
Yeah, like pause. I think I have this written down somewhere, like pause and discern if it's truly not aligned or if you're just projecting a trigger or something that's coming up for you.
Yeah. Yeah, this is interesting. I love this conversation. It's definitely powerful. And And I think that this is kind of like almost going back to what we were talking about like earlier before we hopped on, right? We hopped on, we're like, how can sometimes you tell what's the difference between your ego and
Mm-hmm.
not your ego, right? Your intuition. What is the difference? Because sometimes that can be meddled too, as well. It can be in muggy waters. And I think like those two, when you have triggers, right? When you have triggers and you're setting boundaries, are the boundaries coming from your ego or are they coming from your intuition? Where are they coming from? And so I find that there is a lot of, I guess, like self-realization that happens in these moments of boundaries, which is like amazingly powerful.
Yeah, and that's when you have to have like a toolbox of tools that you kind of use the techniques to use so you can get curious and be able to discern ego versus intuition and what does it look like or feel like either which way and be able to decipher that for yourself, right? But if you don't practice self-reflection enough and don't have that self-awareness, then you're not even pausing, and that's how people start projecting and just come off as angry and jerks sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's their wounds, right? It's like it has nothing to do with you. When you do set the boundary and it's like the other person, how they react to it. If they react negatively to it, know that it has nothing to do with you. And I think that's a
Mhm.
huge takeaway because sometimes we're already feeling the shame and guilt for saying no, but we know it's important to set the boundary, but we still feel what we feel. And then someone else, the person we're setting that boundary gets mad at us or gets angry or whatever it is. And then we feel even more bad about ourselves. But know that in that moment, that person's reaction has nothing to do with you.
Mm.
It's
I
their
think they
own.
say that, right? Like people who don't respect boundaries, it says more about them than it does about you, the person setting the boundaries.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's, yeah, that is powerful. What was the moment that led you? Because you started off in the beginning, was telling about your story and that you suppressed the trauma. What was the moment that like actually led you to be like, okay, I'm gonna go get a therapist?
Yeah, I believe it was like 6 or 7 years after my trauma, and I had just broken up with a boyfriend at that time who now in retrospect was very toxic and unhealthy. And that was a pattern. It was a lot of unhealthy relationships, platonic and romantic. And it was after this breakup of a few years, and I don't remember what had happened, but I literally was on my floor crying uncontrollably. I had a vivid flashback. And I don't know if something triggered it or not, but I had a flashback of my trauma, of my
Wow.
sexual assault. And I was on my floor crying uncontrollably. And that's when I realized, like, crap, like something's got to change here. Like clearly this is still affecting me, which now in retrospect, yes, now I'm further along in my healing and on the spiritual journey. It always stays with you to some extent. It's just how much it impacts you. But at that time, I don't know, my trauma happened when I was 17. So I don't know, 6, 7 years later, I can't do math. 6, 7 years later, when it had a vivid flashback, then I was like, okay, I can't hide this anymore. I can't just suppress it. I need to address this. And that's when I started going to therapy for the very first time. And at that time, I think because I already had like my own like adult job, then I had like extended health and then I got coverage, insurance coverage for therapy. But at that time, I don't think I would have asked my parents, like, I need to go see a therapist and then can you pay for it? I wouldn't have had that in me to ask them and they wouldn't really know. And even now I'm like in my 30s, a grown adult with my kids. Even my mom's like whispered, she's like, why? Like my partner has his own therapist, I have my own therapist, and then we have a couples counselor. Our little one who's 4 years old goes to play therapy. And my mom's like, why does he have to go with therapy? Like, what's wrong? I was like, you don't have to whisper it. I was like,
Yeah.
we normalize therapy in this household. Like, and she's like, oh, isn't like, your kid too young to go to therapy? And so my mom, yes, immigrant from Hong Kong and a different generation, of course, doesn't understand that. But like, we're still working on that. We're still making progress. And I've had in-laws even ask, like, I've posted on my social media about us doing couples counseling, and it was normalizing it. It was like all positive. I had an in-law that actually called my partner and was like, is everything okay over there? Like, are you guys about to get divorced or something? And my partner's like, did you read the post? It literally said normalized therapy. Like, what is going on here, right? And so that was a moment where I realized, sorry, I went on a roundabout rant. Um, that was a moment I realized that I really had to seek therapy when I had a vivid flashback and I was crying uncontrollably. And I realized I've been hiding it behind this like social butterfly, outgoing and like party goer and everything, and acting like everything was fine. But I was just a hot mess. I'm still a hot mess, don't get me wrong. Like being a mom, I'm a hot mess express all the time. But I think like spiritually and mentally and emotionally, I was a hot mess and I was just hiding it. And
Yeah.
that's when I realized, okay, I need to get some help and talk to someone to have some more tools and techniques to learn to ask for help and openly talk, like how you said, you like to talk to people. And I think it was sharing more of my story. I was hiding it a lot and not telling people because I was worried about protecting other people, worried about other people. Like I called it like the sympathy eyes. I don't like telling people my story and then they like have sympathy eyes and they don't know what to do with me, what to say. And that's normal too, but it's then me being able to create that safety for myself and not seeking it externally. And that was the moment for me. It was like 6, 7 years after my trauma.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing is that you can only suppress things for so long. You can only push things down for so long. And it is eventually going to come back. A breakdown is going to happen, a panic attack, or you're going to get sick. Physically, your body would show it, or things in the external environment just completely fall apart. There's always something like suppressing anything doesn't keep it down. It doesn't go away. It actually manifests itself into something way worse, which sucks, and sometimes it is, I want to say, as simple. Not saying that this is like, not saying that what you went through in the breakdown crying, like that is definitely a scary moment for sure. But there's sometimes so much more
It was obvious. Mhm.
yeah, like, and sometimes it's more complex and it's hard to pinpoint where it can stem from and how it stems from and what did you suppress, especially if people have certain traumas that they may have mentally blocked out too, right? Memory block, right? So there's just like so many levels of it. And I think it is like that realization that comes in, and it's so important to say, okay, I can't do this alone. I'm not here to do this alone. And I think that that's sometimes people feel like in their trauma, in their wounds, in their breakdowns, in their anxiety attacks, is that they feel alone, but you're not.
Mhm.
And you're not meant to do it alone. And I think that that is just something that's should be normalized more, whether people get a therapist, a coach, a counselor, a spiritual mentor. I had a spiritual mentor. That's who I had. And for me, it was like my point was thoughts of like, what's the point of living? And then I really dove deep and did some healing with her. And that was just, wow, okay, this is what it takes. It sucks in the moment, but I understand the purpose now.
Yeah, I think it's, healing doesn't happen in isolation. You can feel alone, but we can be alone together and heal in community. Similarly to what you said, and I was saying, like talking to people, whether that's a therapist or just a friend and like a support network, your inner circle, heal in community, and you get to share perspectives. And that being vulnerable, I think, is such a key to connection. That's when you get to find your people and who you can trust and who you can have conversations with. And I think, yeah, me and my journey and coming out and talking a lot about my trauma and my healing journey, and that I am more spiritual now and I'm very different from who I was before. And yes, you lose people along the way, but I've gained so much more conscious connections, so many more conscious connections as well too because of that. Because of my partner and I dealing with a lot of narcissism and setting boundaries and firm boundaries that weren't easy, that's created more turmoil. Some of our friends have come out and closer to us and said, actually, we're experiencing that. Can you help us? Like, this is what we're going through. And it's scary. And it's sometimes there's a lot of shame around that too, right? Like, oh, I'm the jerk that has to set boundaries. But oh, it's created so much more lightness in our family and happiness and joy. And sometimes people don't see that, right? And so I think it's been, yeah, not easy, but also such a beautiful journey when you can become so self-aware and be able to have these conversations, then we can heal in community. I think we don't feel so alone.
Exactly. Setting these boundaries, there's going to be some people in the healing journey and setting boundaries that are going to maybe go away for a period and come back, or they go away and you don't see them again. And that's okay. That's life. And I think that when you do bring in, as you said, more like-minded, conscious people, and you say something like, I'm having an off night, I can't hang out tonight, there's a little bit more like, okay, that's cool. That's cool. I have a friend that I've been meaning to hang out with, and it's just like life has been so busy. And, I messaged her and I was like, hey, finally got some free time. I'm so sorry I didn't message you sooner. Let me know when you're free. And she was like, oh, it's all good. I'm busy too. It's just nice when you just have somebody who's on that same wavelength, who gets it, who gets that life is messy, or that, you might not see each other in 3 months, 6 months. But then when you do, it's like, you never like left. Like it's
Yeah,
like,
no time has passed.
exactly. And it's just, that's nice, instead of like, well, why didn't you, or like, or the passive aggressive, like, oh, you're alive, and it's just kind of like, okay. And so it's nice when you are able to surround yourself in that environment. And as you said, with the family, like, when you begin to be self-aware and you begin to set your boundaries, like in a family capacity or in a relationship capacity, it makes things smoother. Because I think that sometimes we have this assumption that our partners can read our minds. And I think that's just like an unconscious thing. You live together, you're in each other's space, and so you think like, I'm just gonna say like, sure, fine, in a text message, or like, hey, like that, just not respond the way I do, and just say it that way, that this is why I'm upset. But then it's like, oh, your partner can just be like, oh, okay, she just said okay, cool, and not think of that, and then you get upset for them not understanding that you're upset, and then there's this whole like situation happening. Whereas if you would have been like, oh no, like what you said or what you did, I didn't like that, or whatever the boundary was, and I'm going to throw this one in as well, you self-reflect, and it's like, why didn't I like that they did that? And
Mm,
what did they actually do? Is it actually bad? But is there a boundary to be set, or is there something I need to heal? That's one thing
mm.
I do a lot, is I always reflect and I say, is this a boundary for me to set, or is there something I need to look at and heal? And then I try to remove myself from the situation and look at it from a third party, and actually look at like, what they say or what they do, is it actually bad? Is it actually disrespecting me? Is it actually putting me down? Or is it my perception, or maybe my feeling towards it? Or maybe it's bringing up something from the past that I went through, that someone else did it in a very degrading way, but maybe they're not doing it in a degrading way. So there's
Oh,
a,
I love that you brought this up.
yeah. Yeah, like, let me know, what are your thoughts about that? Because I do that constantly. For me, I don't want to be the nagging girlfriend of like, well, I don't like that you did this, and I don't like that you did that, and I don't like that it's, and it's just, no, that's, no, no.
Yeah, I mean, and to bring it all back to self-love, I think, especially, so I've been with my partner for 11 years and married for, I don't know, 6 or something. And we have 2 kids. And for me now I kind of saw it before, but I would say, and you don't have to have kids. I'm not an advocate of having kids, but I think it was after having kids that we realized the communication, and a lot of partnerships around us, and families around us, they aren't able to set those boundaries within the relationship and communicate effectively and efficiently, especially when they have kids. And so what we've seen is a lot of resentment, typically from the female, the mom. And I think a lot of that I see, is that self-love. You need to honor yourself and respect yourself to then communicate. And like you said, it's not, and I hate that word, the nag, being a nag or naggy. All right. And that's the thing. It's like, it shouldn't be like that. It should just be mutual respect for your partner.
Yeah.
And I think that really comes back to it. It's, yeah, people can't read your minds, whether it's your partner, or your friend, or a family member, or anything, right? So you need to learn to be able to know your values and honor yourself and be able to articulate and communicate that. I'm not saying you have to be like professional public speaker. It's just being able to say that. And and definitely for sure, I think in communicating for me in my partnership and in my relationship, I've learned a lot of things like I'm a control freak, and a lot of those are symptoms of PTSD.
Mm.
I need to control every situation. And for my partner, he like didn't understand like why am I always like that. And so it's learning, being able to reflect on ourselves, but also communicate together again, whether it's platonic or romantic relationships. I think that, so I'm so glad you brought that up, because that comes back from self-love. And I think so many people around us, at least in my inner circle that we've seen, they're not in most the happiest relationships because they haven't like, I don't know if you had this, but like in your 20s, there's like this era where everyone was getting married because now they've dated these people for X amount of years, and it's kind of like, okay, the next step. But I kid you not, this one year my partner and I were at like, I want to say like 10 weddings. And like one or two of them were like, oh, they're such a sweet couple. They're like, get each other. It's such a loving relationship. And all the other ones were like, literally one of them, I was not partaking in this, just full disclosure. There were people taking bets on how long this marriage was going to last. Because a lot of these marriages, like they've just been together, they're just settling. We've heard of this, right? You just settle, or you grew apart, but you're just worried, like you're the fear of the unknown, right? You're more fearful of being alone and single. And for me, my self-love journey and healing journey took me to a point where when I was 25, and when I was younger, thought, oh, by 25, I'll be married with 3 kids. I was 25 and I was single, and I was like, you know what? I'd rather be single forever and have full control over my own happiness than to be in a relationship just to say I have a partner and not have control and feel like I'm in a toxic relationship, or, I have to report to someone, and it wasn't. Whereas like my partnership now, we communicate, we're creating this life together that we both love. He does his own thing for fun, I do my own thing for fun, we do a lot of things together for fun. And now that we have kids, we talk a lot about parenting, and we're very intentional and conscious about how we want to, what our values are for our family and for our parenting and raising our kids. And I see that a lot in a lot of relationships. And then it's even harder when you have like lack of sleep and low energy when if you have kids around too. And people need to communicate those for themselves as individuals, and then as like family, what your family values are. And I think that all comes back to self-love. If we all loved ourselves and got to a point where you can truly find a partner that's the right fit and best fit for you and for each other, then you're in healthy relationships versus you're just in a relationship because you don't even know what you want and don't want, and you can't advocate for yourself. And then you're like passive aggressive, sending these texts and stuff. Whereas we can just come at it healthy and not be defensive. Don't get me wrong, my partner and I still like get defensive when we come at each other, but then we can take a pause and like, okay, this is actually what I meant. This is what was coming up for me. And so my partner was like defensive because I was like, you just like downgrade. No, you like lowered yourself just to like be a bro and like have solidarity with your bro, who at that time we were basically commenting that they're not a very good active parent and partner. They didn't know the name of their kid's school. And also this is a trend that's going on online right now. They like interview dads, and the dads don't know their kid's like doctor's name, or what, like the kid's teacher's name or something. Anyways, this happened in real life, and a partner's like, oh yeah, I don't know. And then I was like, dude, why'd you say that? And he's like, it was just a joke, Char. Like, don't be so serious. I was like, no, because that's an opera. And then he got defensive and we kind of got into it. But the next morning I came at it and I was like, you know what? I think that I'm really proud of what a good partner and parent you are, co-parent you are. And for me, it's not about me, but I think for you, you should be proud of the work that you put in to be such an involved parent. And you do know the name of our kid's school, and that would have been an opportunity for you to not call out your friends, because I know you're not there, but just to show them by example, like, oh, you can be, it's not cool to be an inactive parent. It's not cool to not know your kid's school name. Like, that was an opportunity for you to celebrate what a good active partner and parent you are. And so, again, sorry, I went on a whole rant, but I think that all comes down to self-love too, right? In relationships, again, whether it's romantic or platonic, it's having that respect so then you can communicate how to be treated and how to communicate with people.
I love that you brought that example up because for me, what was coming up in that moment is also the other thing, especially with this TikTok, whatever trend
Yeah, I just
happening.
heard about it. I always say I live under a rock, so I'm like, I heard about it.
Oh, well, I don't even like I haven't heard about it, but it's just, but I know there's just like so many trends happening these days. But it's one of these things is that it's shitty because it's like you can't expect everybody again to be you. Nobody can be you. So, and no dad is going to be the same. No mom is going to be the same. And so to have this expectation of like everybody needing to know their child's teacher's name or their child's doctor's name, like if you're in a partnership, there's two of you and there's a reason there's two of you, right? Everybody's going to bring their part of what they're good at. It's the same thing like in a company, in a group setting. Not everybody's going to have the same gifts. Not everybody's going to have the same things that they're good at. Everybody's going to bring in their own part. And in a partnership, it's the same thing. And you can't expect the other person to be like you or to remember things like you. You can't expect your family to be the same way that handle certain things the way you would handle them. And I think that that is the realization when you do the inner work and you find that self-love and that compassion for yourself, that you're like, wait, everybody else is different. So obviously there's a way to set boundaries of like splitting tasks and everything and but using what each person in the partnership is good at. And maybe some people struggle remembering stuff as names. I know I'm horrible with names. I'm told their name is actually written down on like either an email address or in a text, then I will actually physically remember the person's name. But I can meet somebody 10 times and not remember their name. And it's just who I am. And then you have other people who are like amazing at remembering names. So yeah, they probably would be really good at remembering their kid's doctor's name. Whereas for me, I'm like, well, maybe if I see it written down 10 times and it's in my phone or something, then I'll be like, oh yeah, so and so. But it's just, again, it's kind of going back to it. It's you gotta one, take care of you, and then once you take care of you, you begin healing you, you fall in love with you, then you can understand where everybody else is coming from. And then you could be like, okay, so you're good at this, or you're that's like your role. I'll support you in things, and they'll and vice versa. Obviously, it's not like it should fall on one person's shoulder, but to have this expectation on how to be and what you should know and what you shouldn't know. Again, going back to shoulds, I'm kind of coming back around full circle. So those are my 2 cents on that element. And I think like from what I've learned in terms of like observing people and partnerships and everything is like that's kind of can't expect people to react be like you do like you at all. You can guide them, you can guide them and give them little nuggets and everything, but you can like if it's not who they are, you can't expect them to be that.
That's a good point. I would say, I would argue that I want to normalize that both parents should know their kids' information.
Yeah,
But
like there's just the example.
yeah, but
They
that's a really good way to like have that self-awareness to then know we can, and that's why we have to communicate, be able
exactly.
to communicate because not everyone's going to think, like you said, read our minds. So we have to be able to communicate.
But then again, like I'll spin it in another way. Let's say, okay, so you know the kid's doctor's name, off by heart, but then your husband, your partner may not know it off by heart, but it's written in their phone.
Yeah, they can, as long as they have a way and means. Yes.
Exactly. So this is what I'm saying with the TikTok video, the TikTok trend. You're putting someone on
Mhm.
the spot to know it by memory, but not
Okay.
everybody is knows it by memory. So that's kind of, I guess, the point I was making is like not everybody not
Okay.
everybody learns the same you do. Not everybody reacts the same you react. Not everybody would do something the way you do. So you
I
can't,
appreciate that perspective because I was just looking at that trend with my friend. I was like, what? This is disgusting and annoying that like all these dads don't know this information, but I appreciate that perspective then.
you
Thank
can't,
you.
it's probably like the dad probably has it written down on his phone in his sack of piles somewhere. Somewhere the dad has it. You don't know, right? You don't know. And if, especially if you're putting somebody on the spot. Like for me, if I get put on the spot, I freeze. I freeze. I'm like, I know I should know this information, but you know,
Okay.
so
Okay. I appreciate this a
there's
lot.
so, yeah, but there's just like so
Because I'm
much.
like ready to come at these dads. It's like, what the fuck? Like,
And I get that from a mom's perspective, right? I get where you're coming from. You're watching this and you're like, how do they not know? I get that. I get that as well. But there's always a different perception.
I appreciate that.
There's always something else happening in the back end that we don't know about. And it's just that's that well, this is why I love these conversations. It's like it's
Mhm.
the shift, it's a challenge. It's the having these conversations and be like, oh, okay, now I'm seeing things from a different lens, or like, oh, something I just learned something I didn't know yesterday. That's cool. Yeah.
And that's also where it comes from, like that self-love, that self-awareness is that we can be open to be curious and to learn different perspectives and to hear different perspectives and take away what we learn or unlearn. And I think that takes versus like coming defensive and like having an argument or a debate about it, right? It's okay, I love this.
I love that. Yeah. And I just love that basically ended it on the most beautiful note because I think that was just like, you just said everything in that last sentence, and I do appreciate that. I think we really dove deep into this topic in so many ways, and I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation.
I did. Thank you so much.
Welcome, and want to tell the audience how can they find you if they would love to continue following you, getting to learn more about everything you talk around on self-love, confidence, and boundaries, and normalizing therapy. Yeah, right.
Yes, please. You can find me. My website is charwong.richardson.com. So that's CharWongRichardson.com. I am active on Facebook, Instagram, starting a couple podcasts. I do have a worksheet. So if you want to contact me, I do have a worksheet that would really help people who are working around their limiting beliefs and how to flip that and reframe their thoughts and uncover some mindset blocks. So I have a worksheet I'm happy to walk people through and share with people if they would like to that. Just contact me, Instagram at char.wong.richardson. And I'd be happy to stay connected. Follow me for tips and tools that you can implement easily in your day-to-day life now.
Yeah, I love that. And it's all going to be down in the show notes. So if you are listening to this episode while you're driving or doing some house chores or something and you don't have a chance to write it all down, it will be in the show notes. So do not worry about that. Give Char a follow. I love her energy. I love her vibe. And just, I can have these conversations all day, but I wanted to be mindful of both of our times. And so thank you again for being here. And for the listeners, I will see you next time.